I indulged myself in season 2 of Nobody Wants This, and I have some thoughts. I've got my cup of tea here with me, so let's talk about this. I actually quite enjoyed Nobody Wants This season 2. I would say that it seems to have had some mixed reviews compared to season 1, which I think was unanimously enjoyed. But I would say overall, season 2 had its problems, but I think overall it was very much enjoyable for me, and it was enough to keep me hooked for an entire sitting. So I would say that they really kind of kept the energy of the show contained from the first season. I think it flowed really well into the second season. Just the lightness of the energy, the lightness of the cinematography, and the Los Angeles living, all of that, the podcast that the girls do. So they kind of kept that kind of continuity from season 1, which I did enjoy. And Joanne and her sister Morgan, they they didn't really change, did they? And I'll talk about that a little bit more, right, in the second half of this video. But I would say, looking at the relationship of Joanne and Noah, I can see that there is potential for compatibility, but I find it frustrating because I think both parties should be making an equal effort to make this compatibility possible. I think I've seen a lot of people talk about how they're actually completely inherently incompatible, and I think that's false. I think that you become more compatible if both parties are actually putting in the effort. I don't think they're inherently doomed. So I liked seeing the potential of their relationship on this particular season. I absolutely loved the character of Noah's brother and his sister-in-law. I thought that their part of the story was actually quite fascinating. I cannot remember her name. However, she is having a character moment of rethinking this marriage that she's had and this family that she's built from a young age, and really figuring herself out as a woman and thinking, is this actually what I still want? So I really loved how they followed her as a side story, but that actually ended up being probably sometimes more interesting when Noah and Joanne's story kind of wasn't having much momentum at times in different episodes. So I think that was a very good choice of a woman choosing herself and really rethinking and thinking of how conscious she was over the choices that she made over years ago. So I loved that. Was quite a strong point. And I will, I suppose, talk about the issues that were there. So I don't think that there was particular issues with the actual fabric of the show. I think it is more of a writing that was a little bit frustrating. This show is weird because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the frustrations I'm about to voice, I still was able to go through them, and they were not overshadowed. They did not overshadow, the rest of how much I enjoyed this show. But I have to say that for season 3, these frustrations need to be taken into account. I think a few other people had these frustrations as well. And I would say that my issue is character development, particularly with Joanne. Let's have a sip of tea. Because I felt that Joanne basically did zero growing up from season 1 and 2. And I think my issue was that Joanne seemed to continue her patterns of relating, and I felt that she basically learned nothing from Noah. Whereas I felt that Noah was doing a lot of compromising and a lot of learning and going around Joanne, However, Joanne's main character point or arc, I suppose, was trying to figure out if Noah is going to be another guy who disappoints her, or is going to be another guy that falls short because of particular things. So an example I could think of is the Valentine's Day arrangement that Noah had, that Joanne was not 100% on board with. Particularly, I think it was the necklace that Noah got her that had her name, that he had gotten exes before. And that, as a woman, was completely understandable. And that was a very fair point, I think, that she made, to be concerned about that. However, I felt that Joanne herself did absolutely no growing at all. She remained in this kind of perpetual state of adolescence, of, being like the mean girl, complaining about everything, being really antagonistic and combative in every turn. And I felt that every single time Noah was the one who had to continuously adapt around her. I feel like Noah did some growing up in this season with his faith. He did changes to his way of thinking. He developed in his way of thinking. He was rethinking the way that he's always seen the world, and he was actioning it, particularly to do with his faith. He did lots of steps of growing, but I actually felt that Joanne stayed exactly the same. And I think that was the root of their compatibility issues, the inability for Joanne to do some growing up. I think my frustration was the attitude felt that, Joanne could stay exactly as she is because she's fine exactly the way that she is, and some of her characteristics are just being mean and immature and petty, and nobody was calling out the fact that these are character things that she could be growing on. Noah didn't call out her behavior. No one else in her family or her life was calling out on her behavior of being permanently mean and, really acting like a little, a petulant toddler all the time. That literally did not change. There was no self-reflection upon her to behave more maturely, right? To be kinder. I felt that Noah learned from Joanne how to be true to his feelings and to express how he's feeling unapologetically. However, Joanne learned nothing from Noah, and I feel like Joanne has a lot to learn from Noah as well. So it felt very much that Noah has always had to do this self-correction and learn so much from Joanne, but I don't see Joanne learning anything from Noah. And Joanne could learn so much from Noah. She could learn some self-control, she could learn some maturity and some kindness. And I think her learning that will actually develop her character and increase their compatibility and their relationship success, I suppose. But that didn't happen, and I think that was a writing problem. I think it was unfortunate that the writers missed this mark. I don't know if they will emphasize any character growth in Joanne in the next season. I'm not quite sure. However, I thought this was a missed opportunity for it to feel more of a well-rounded show and for it to have more of that maturity, I suppose, feel to it, really. So those were probably my main issues with this film. I mean, I could actually say the same for Morgan. I think Morgan, once again, actually did more character development than her sister, I would say, actually. Like, she had some moments with the therapist, being in a relationship with a therapist, and then kind of coming back to her senses. So she seemed to have some development. I feel like everybody grew but Joanne, which I find quite interesting. I feel like everybody was called out on things. Everybody was called out on their problems. Everybody was called out on their flaws. But Joanne, I feel like everybody grew but Joanne. So that's probably my main issue with this show. That's my main issue. And I think unfortunately it does speak to the wider to the zeitgeist of people, you know, feeling that they don't have to do absolutely anything to, you know, to bring any kind of maturity to a relationship, that they have no room for growth, and that people should take them as they are. And I think we should be loved exactly the way that we are. However, we all have a responsibility of doing some self-examination and being honest with ourselves about how our behavior might affect people, or how our behavior might stifle our relationships or choke them. And we have the responsibility to see how we can grow. And I feel like Joanne did not have that moment, even though she's our main character. So I think that was a writing problem, and I really hope that they fix and correct this in the next season. That's my main issue, honestly. Otherwise, I enjoyed this, so I think it's worth the watch. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.